Welcome back, fellow game developers. I hope you're doing great. And in the third part of the melee combat enemy series, we are going to add patrolling behavior to our enemy. If you haven't watched the previous episode, you can find the link to them in the description below. Alright, so let's jump right into it. We are going to start by creating two new game objects for left and right boundaries. Let's call it right limit and left limit. And to easily recognize the position of game objects, we are going to apply icon to them and put the game objects to the correct position, left being on the left and right being on the right. Well, pretty obvious, right? So that's all we have to do in Unity for now, and it's time to jump in the Visual Studio to do, you know what, hocus pocus stuff. Now in the public region, we need to declare two variables of type transform to store the left and right boundaries, and I have made some changes to the script to improve it. So first of all, we are going to change the variable type of target from GameObject to transform. And since we have changed the variable type to transform, we need to make changes in some code statement also. First one is on trigger enter 2D function. So here we need to replace the GameObject by transform. And then inside enemy logic function, we can simply write target.position. And the last one is inside the move function. Here also we can simply write target.position. Now we are going to make some changes in the direction in which we raycast because we are going to flip the enemy. So I'm going to come in the update function and inside it change vector2.left to transform.right. And we need to do the same in the raycast debugger function so that it matches with the direction in which we are raycasting. And since we want to add patrolling behavior to our enemy, we want to keep the enemy moving continuously. So previously we were calling the move function only when player gets in the range of enemy, but now we are just going to call the move function in update function, and we don't want the enemy to move when he is in the attack mode. With that, now we need to check whether the enemy is in between the boundaries or not, and to do that we are going to create a new private function which will return a boolean value, and inside it we are going to return a value depending on the condition. And we need to check if position of enemy on x-axis is greater than position of left boundary and less than position of right boundary. If this condition is met, then value will be true, otherwise it will be false. Now with this statement we can check whether the enemy is in between the boundary or not, but what happens when it goes out of boundary? So we are going to write a function for the same now. Inside the update function, we are going to create an if statement, and we are going to say that if enemy is not in limit, and we also need to make sure that player is not in range, and we need to also make sure that enemy is not playing the attack animation. If these three conditions are met, then we will select a new target, because in our move function we are moving the enemy toward a target. Now let's create select target function, and inside it we are going to calculate the distance of enemy from left boundary and save it inside a float variable. To calculate the distance we will use the distance function, and inside it we will mention the position of enemy and position of left limit, and we will do the same for the right boundary. Now if distance to left boundary is greater than the distance to the right boundary, then we need to set our target to left limit, otherwise set the target to right limit. So if we take this example, and if distance to left is 2 and distance to right is 4, that means this condition is not true, so our target will be right boundary and enemy will start moving toward the right limit. And from here it is going to flip and change the target to left limit and move toward it. So now let's see how it looks in the code. So if distance to left is greater than distance to right, then our target is left limit, else our target is right limit. We can write this statement using ternary operator, but for the sake of simplicity we are going to use if else statement. And also we are going to flip it, so we are going to create a new function to do it. So first of all we are going to store the Euler angle, or however you pronounce it, in a vector3 variable, and if position of enemy is greater than position of target, then we want the rotation value on y-axis to be equal to 180, otherwise set the value to just 0. And then we set this value back to Euler angles. So now what is happening here is that whenever the position of enemy crosses the position of our target, this boolean condition will turn to false, and because enemy is not in limit anymore, this condition will execute, and from here system is going to select a new target, and also since the position of enemy is greater than position of target, it is going to flip the enemy and the enemy is going to start moving toward the new target. So this is how the loop of the enemy patrolling is working. So now we are going to come in the on trigger enter function and call the flip function whenever the player enters the range of enemy, and you are going to find out why we are doing this in a bit. And we need to call the select target function in awake function just to make sure that enemy always have a target to follow and that we don't get an error. And also I almost forgot to do it, but since enemy will always be walking, we need to remove the walking animation from here. With that we come to end of our code. So now let's jump back into. Wait, what's happening?
Said, buddy, I guess it's time.
What? Already?
Yep.
Alright then, let's do it. We're interrupting this broadcast to invite you to our Discord community. It's the perfect place where you can talk with me and get the project files of all the tutorials for free. And we will be streaming the development of the game that we're developing at Diseased Games. So if you guys like to see live development of a game, then do come join us. And you can also do streaming of your game and game development. So come be part of the growing community where we talk about game development and video games and anime and everything awesome. Click the link in the description to join now. So in order to make it work, we need to set reference to both the boundaries that were declared in the script. So I'm going to drag and drop them in the inspector. And that's all we need to do. Now when we play it, so you can see that the enemy starts patrolling between the points, and the moment player enters the trigger area, enemy starts to move toward the player, and when close enough it attacks. And the moment we move out of the range of enemy, it turns back and go back to the patrolling state. Now we can make the enemy even more interesting by moving the trigger area a little behind the enemy so that the player can be detected from behind the enemy also. So when we play the game, you can see that whenever the player enters the enemy range from behind, the enemy is going to flip and initiate the attack. And the best part of this whole enemy system is that it is fully customizable, and you can edit the range when the enemy will start chasing the player by changing the size of trigger area, and for how long it will keep chasing the player by changing the value of raycast length. And you can also edit at what distance the enemy will start attacking the player by changing the value of attack distance. And you can also decide whether the enemy will detect the player from behind or not, just like I showed you right now. And with that you have a perfect enemy which can do patrolling and which can do melee attack to the player. I hope you found this mini series on making 2D melee combat anime useful, and I got some more exciting and useful content on game development coming in future. So don't forget to subscribe and click the bell icon so that you don't miss a single video. And until next time, see you fellas, and also take care.